Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if a car knows you are there and how it shows you? Well, this new study dives into exactly that, exploring how robots can learn to drive like us. Imagine you are standing at a crosswalk and an autonomous vehicle is approaching. How does it tell you it is going to stop? It is not like it has a little sign that pops out, right? This research is all about figuring out the best way for self-driving cars to communicate with us pedestrians, not with words, but with their movement. The big question is, can we make these cars drive in a way that feels natural and safe to us, so we know what they're going to do without any confusion? Think about driving. When a human driver sees a pedestrian, they might slow down smoothly, or maybe a bit more abruptly. There are lots of subtle cues in how they move that we instinctively understand. For self-driving cars, or AVs as they're called, this is a huge challenge. They need to communicate their intentions to us, the people on the street, and right now, one of the most promising ways they can do this is through their actual driving style, their speed, and how they brake. It is like a silent conversation. The tricky part is that a car's deceleration isn't just one single thing. It is a whole sequence of movements when it starts slowing down, how fast it slows down, and where it eventually stops. All these things are connected. They happen over time. This makes it really hard to design an experiment where you just change one or two things and expect to find the perfect yielding motion. Previous studies often looked at isolated bits, like just the initial braking speed, but that doesn't tell the whole story. So, what did the researchers do? They started by looking at how real humans drive when they are yielding to pedestrians. They collected data on how human drivers naturally slow down and stop at crosswalks. And they found a clever way to describe this smooth, human-like motion. They used something called the minimum jerk model, or MJM. Don't let the fancy name scare you. Jerk is basically how quickly the acceleration of a car changes, and the MJM model aims to create movements that are super smooth by minimizing this. Jerk. The really cool thing about using this MJM model is that it can generate a whole speed profile using just two main numbers. Think of them as knobs you can turn. How far away from the crosswalk the car decides to start slowing down, and how long it takes to come to a complete stop. These two knobs create a whole spectrum of natural-looking braking behaviors. And get this, they tested this MJM model against real human driving data, and it did a pretty good job. On average, the model's predicted speed paths were very close to how real people drove. This means that with just these two parameters, stopping distance and duration, they can create speed profiles that look and feel very human-like. This is a huge step because it gives them a way to explore a whole range of possible AV braking styles. Now here is where the experiment gets really interesting. Just because a car can drive safely and efficiently doesn't mean pedestrians will feel safe and understand its intentions. So the researchers decided to ask real people what they thought. They designed an experiment where participants would watch simulated ABS driving towards them, and then rate how safe and how efficient they thought the car's movements were. The idea that a car's movement can communicate is pretty intuitive when you think about it. If a car brakes very early and smoothly, you assume it's yielding. If it zooms up and then slams on the brakes at the last second, you might not feel as safe. Previous research has already shown that pedestrians heavily rely on these kinematic cues. That is just a fancy way of saying the physical movements of the car. Things like its speed and how it decelerates are key to how we judge whether it is safe to cross. For example, if a car is moving slowly, pedestrians often assume it will stop, even if that is not the driver's intention. And deceleration, that is the process of slowing down, is like an active signal. A nice early deceleration signals, hey, I see you, I am going to stop. But the problem is that most of this research has looked at these movements in pieces. They might study the initial speed or just the braking rate. They haven't really looked at the whole speed profile from start to finish. And that is what this new study tries to address. They want to understand how pedestrians react to the entire continuous motion of the car. This is where the adaptive experiment and Bayesian optimization come in. Imagine the researchers have a dial for how far the car starts braking and another dial for how long it takes to stop. They want to find the perfect combination of these two dials that makes people feel the safest and most efficient. Traditional experiments where you preset a bunch of different car behaviors to show people can be really inefficient. You might end up testing a lot of combinations that aren't very good. An adaptive experiment is smarter. It learns as it goes. Bayesian optimization is like a smart assistant for the experiment. It builds a kind of belief about which combinations of stopping distance and duration are likely to get good ratings, meaning high safety and efficiency scores. Then, it uses this belief to pick the next car behavior to show the participant. It tries to balance between trying out new things it is uncertain about exploration and trying out things it thinks will be really good exploitation. This way, it can find the best settings much faster, focusing on the most promising areas of the design space, the world of all possible braking behaviors. So how did they actually do this? First, as we talked about, they used that MJM model to recreate human-like driving. They took real driving data and used it to figure out the best stopping distance and duration parameters for that model. This gave them a good starting point, like a baseline of human-like yielding. They then took 62 examples of human-driven, safe and efficient yielding maneuvers and fitted the MJM to them. They treated stopping distance and duration as the key knobs to adjust. They used a process, which sounds complicated, but is essentially a smart way to tune those knobs until the MJM model produced a speed profile that was very similar to the original human driving profile. They were aiming to minimize the root mean squared error, or RMSE, which is just a measure of how different the two speed profiles are. A lower RMSE means a better match. For the main experiment, they used a super cool virtual reality simulator called Hiker at the University of Leeds. Participants stood in a virtual road, just like you would at a real crosswalk. They could see cars approaching from the side. The scene was in 3D, making it feel very real. They even set it up so that a virtual bus stop partially blocked the view, just like in real life, making the challenge of seeing the car and its intentions a bit more realistic. In the experiment, they played with those two knobs. We talked about duration and stopping distance. The duration could be anywhere from 3 to 7 seconds, and the stopping distance from 4 to 12 meters. They kept the car's initial speed the same for everyone to make sure they were only looking at the effects of the braking behavior. They used a platform called X, which is like the engine for their smart, adaptive experiment. It uses that Bayesian optimization we discussed to figure out which combination of those two knobs to test next. And the goal was to maximize what participants rated as safety and efficiency. Each participant went through 3 sets of trials. One for each type of time gap, that is how much time they had before they were prompted to observe the vehicle. Each set had 20 trials, so in total, each participant experienced 60 different AV braking scenarios. They planned to have 30 participants. In each trial, after hearing a sound cue, participants would observe the approaching car's speed profile. They weren't crossing the road. Their task was just to watch and judge. After each scenario, they had to rate the car's safety and efficiency on a simple 1 to 5 scale. So before they even started the big participant experiment, they did a crucial check. They wanted to make sure their MJM model and the 2 parameters were actually good at mimicking human driving. They took that data from 62 human driving instances, and they found that yes, the MJM model, with just stopping distance and duration, could create speed profiles that were remarkably similar to how real people drove. The average error, that RMSE we talked about, was about 0.88 meters per SE cont. That is pretty good, meaning the model is capturing the essence of human deceleration. They also summarized the typical values they found for stopping distance and duration in human driving. On average, humans started braking about 7.67 meters from the conflict point, which is like the point of potential conflict, the crosswalk itself, and took about 5.03 seconds to stop. These numbers give us a baseline for what human-like braking looks like. This figure here shows a few examples of how well the MJM model matched real human driving. You can see the gray line is the actual human driver, and the orange line is what the MJM model produced. They look pretty similar, right? This really supports their idea of using MJM as the way to generate these AV speed profiles. And this table gives you a clear summary of the numbers we just discussed, like the average RMSE duration and stopping distance. It all points to the MJM being a solid tool for creating human-like AV movements. Now, what does this all mean? The study is setting up to answer a big question. What kind of braking behavior do pedestrians prefer from autonomous vehicles? We know what might be objectively safe or efficient, but what makes people feel safe and understood. The core idea is that by using this adaptive experiment and Bayesian optimization, they can efficiently explore all the possible ways an AV can brake based on those 2 simple parameters. They're not just trying random settings. They're using a smart system to guide the search. The ultimate goal is to find AV speed profiles that are not only safe and efficient from a traffic perspective, but also feel intuitive and predictable to pedestrians. This is crucial for building trust between humans and autonomous systems. If an AV brakes like a human, we're likely to understand its intentions better and feel more comfortable interacting with it. This research is a fantastic example of using technology to understand human behavior in a very practical way. By modeling human motion and then using smart algorithms to test different AV movements, they're paving the way for AVs that can communicate effectively not with words but with their very motion. It's about making sure these future vehicles are good neighbors on our roads, and that starts with understanding how they move and how we perceive that movement. The cool part about this research is how it bridges the gap between objective performance of a vehicle and the subjective experience of a pedestrian. They're not just looking at numbers, they're looking at how those numbers translate into how we feel. What is really promising is the potential for this to influence how AVs are designed. Instead of just focusing on the technology of driving, they're focusing on the human element of interaction. This could lead to AVs that feel less like robots and more like considerate road users. Of course, like any study, there are always things to consider. One limitation might be that this is all happening in a simulator. While Hiker is very immersive, it is not the real world. Real-world traffic is much more unpredictable, and pedestrian behavior can vary greatly. So while the findings are super valuable, they'll need to be tested and refined in real-world scenarios. The next steps could involve testing these finely tuned speed profiles with a wider range of participants, perhaps including different age groups or people with different levels of experience with traffic. They could also explore how these braking profiles interact with other forms of communication, like visual signals on the car itself. And that's a wrap on this fascinating look into how AVs can learn to speak our language through motion. What do you think about this approach? Do you think AVs should mimic human driving exactly? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more dives into the latest science. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.